Hi everyone, my name is Cletus. I hope all is well with you today. This video is about how the swastika went from being a sacred symbol used for thousands of years to becoming one of the most hated images in the world. Understanding this transformation matters because the same psychological tactics that corrupted this symbol are still being used by extremist movements today. I'm going to break this down into 4 easy steps so you can see exactly how it happened. We'll start by looking at what the swastika actually meant before it was stolen and twisted into something unrecognizable. To explore the swastika's ancient meaning, we begin with understanding how sacred symbols can be destroyed and their history erased. Here we see how ancient texts and sacred meanings get torn apart and replaced by propaganda and military imagery. Look at this temple roof, where the swastika appears in its original sacred context, a symbol of spiritual significance that has adorned religious architecture for millennia. These monks walking through temple courtyards represent thousands of years of peaceful tradition, where this symbol served as a marker of auspiciousness and spiritual harmony. Notice this beautiful floor mosaic featuring the swastika at the center of a lotus flower. This demonstrates the symbol's true meaning, derived from Sanskrit, literally translating to conducive to well-being, with its arms representing the sun's rays and cosmic order. Here we can see ancient Sanskrit manuscripts containing the word Arya. In its original context, this term represented an ethical ideal, meaning noble or honorable. It was a cultural standard, not a biological classification. Notice how these symbols of peace and inclusive honor were eventually seized and repurposed by the Nazi regime. They transformed these sacred concepts into banners for a movement that would commit history's greatest atrocities through systematic psychological manipulation. We've now traced the swastika back to its roots as a sacred symbol of harmony and understood how Arya originally meant noble in character, not race. Let's go to the next step, which is to examine how the Nazis deliberately hijacked these ancient meanings to build false authority for their ideology. To understand how the Nazis exploited antiquity to build authority, observe how our brains process ancient symbols. We're naturally wired to trust things that appear historical and authentic. The regime deliberately connected their modern agenda to genuinely ancient artifacts and sacred texts, borrowing legitimacy from millennia of spiritual tradition. Notice how extremists study authentic historical symbols in museums and archaeological sites, not out of respect, but to identify what they can steal and repurpose. They then attach these stolen ancient symbols to modern military and political movements, creating a false sense of historical continuity. This psychological trick exploits our instinctive bias. We assume ideas that appear to have survived the test of time must contain some fundamental truth. By draping their toxic ideology in the authority of classical civilization, extremists frame their radical agenda as an inevitable ancestral truth, rather than a dangerous modern invention. The Nazis specifically stripped the word Arya of its original ethical meaning, replacing a behavioral framework of honor with a pseudo-scientific biological definition designed to dehumanize. Here we see the tools of pseudoscience that 20th century theorists used to hijack the term Arya, transforming it from an ethical concept into a false biological category. This animation demonstrates how creating a biological binary instantly divides humanity into an us versus them mentality, where the in-group feels superior while automatically dehumanizing everyone else. The result of this psychological manipulation was the justification of unimaginable atrocities against people who were simply manufactured as the other, through twisted definitions of identity. The Nazis had successfully weaponized ancient legitimacy and twisted the concept of Arya into a tool of dehumanization. Next, let's go to step 3, which is to examine how they cemented this perversion through relentless visual propaganda and mass saturation. To understand how visual saturation worked, look at this printing process. The regime mass-produced their redesigned symbol everywhere, using industrial printing to flood society with their new version. Here, we see the strategic pairing in action. Notice how the ancient symbol appears alongside military displays, deliberately creating a psychological link between the sacred design and state power. This street scene shows the saturation strategy at work. The symbol dominated every public space, making it impossible for citizens to escape this new association through constant visual conditioning. Watch as this animation demonstrates how psychological conditioning works. The peaceful meaning of peace and prosperity gets completely overwritten and replaced with associations to military power and state control. The Nazi regime successfully weaponized visual saturation to permanently rewire how billions of people perceive this ancient symbol. Next, let's go to step 4, which is to examine the lasting impact of this propaganda victory and recognize these same manipulation tactics when they appear today. To understand how sacred history was erased, watch as the original peaceful meaning gets literally painted over by the regime's propaganda machine. Here, we see how ancient religious symbols, like this sacred flower carving, become completely obscured as the new association takes hold in public memory. Here we see how modern extremist groups create new symbols using the same psychological playbook, combining ancient aesthetics with contemporary design to manufacture legitimacy. This animation illustrates the cognitive mechanisms at work, how our brains process symbols and the mental shortcuts that make us vulnerable to manipulation. Notice this powerful visual metaphor, ancient symbols draped over modern militaristic imagery, showing how extremists blend historical reverence with contemporary aggression. The firing neurons in this eye represent how our brains form instant associations, the same neurological process that extremists exploit when they hijack sacred symbols. This museum display of an authentic Celtic cross shows how genuine historical artifacts remain protected behind barriers, unlike their corrupted versions that extremists freely appropriate and distort. So that's how a sacred symbol got weaponized and why we need to stay aware. We've traced the whole journey from ancient spirituality to the darkest propaganda in history. Stay curious and keep questioning what you see, and be kind to one another. Please subscribe, share, and comment if you have found this video educational and informative. Thank you, and God bless you.